Hi everyone, my name is Zach Breeding. I'm a dietetic intern for NYU Langone Medical Center, and we're talking about carbohydrates today. There's a lot of speculation out there about whether carbs are good for you or bad for you, and we're going to try and go into that more today. So what's the point of this whole thing? At the end of today, I want you guys to be able to do a few things. First thing is to be able to answer, what is a carb? Name 2 reasons why carbs are important for everyday life. Name the food groups where carbohydrates exist. Locate carbohydrate information on a food label, like on a prepackaged label. Define what a carbohydrate exchange is, which is a little bit complicated, but I think you guys can handle it. And name 3 foods that contain 15 grams of carbohydrates per serving. So what is a carb? So carbs are basically plant sugars. So sugars from plants. So there's glucose, which is from most plants. That's the one that we need the most. There's fructose from fruit, lactose from milk, and sucrose, which is basically table sugar, but it's a combination of 2 glucose molecules together. So there's other combinations in this mix that aren't really present in food, so we're not going to really worry about those. There's starches. So if you think about a food sticking between your fingers when you mush it together, like a piece of cooked pasta or a cooked potato, that's the sugars. That's the starch. That's a carbohydrate. The only exception to that rule, I would say, is carrots, which are not a starchy vegetable, but still stick to your fingers, so don't worry about those. But that's generally a rule of thumb for how to tell what a starch is. So, but think about beans, right? Yams, these are all things that stick to your fingers. Carbohydrates are energy, right? So glucose is our main source of energy. It runs all of our basic processes, from our brains to our eyes to our muscles and tissues, which we'll talk about this in a little bit. It's fiber, so we'll talk about more about fiber in a little bit as well. But there's 2 kinds. One helps things move, basically, through your body, and one kind of hangs out a little bit and collects the bad stuff, which we'll also talk about that a little bit as well. Unfortunately, there are also triglycerides, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So as you can see to my left and to my right, there's a triglyceride molecule. I know that sounds kind of funny, but if you can see the word glyc, the G-L-Y-C, in the word glyceride, that's a glucose derivative. It's a sugar alcohol called glycerol. So the vertical portion, that's glucose, and then a derivative of it, basically. And the 3 horizontal pieces are fats. So the fats connect to the sugar, to the plant sugar, to the glucose, and that creates triglycerides, which can become adipose, which can become fat, which is not necessarily a bad thing. This helps lubricate your skin and your mucous membranes. That is good for insulation. Think about a really, really, really skinny person who gets cold in the winter, or a really, really, really obese person who's sweating in the winter. So fats are really good insulation. So having the right amount is good. It's also a good transportation system for vitamins A, D, E, and K, which are the fat-soluble vitamins. So you got to have fat in order to transport those vitamins throughout your body. And it's food. It's good food. Everything that we basically really enjoy is a carbohydrate, or a carbohydrate is part of our meal because it is involved in so many different food groups. What food groups? So this is the My Plate. This is from the USDA. This has replaced the pyramid. And there's grains, so that's bread, bagels, pasta, da-da-da-da-da. There's legume, lentils, all that business. There's fruit. We all know what fruits are. Apples to oranges to bananas to kiwi to you name it. Starchy vegetables. This is a little bit more complicated in the vegetable world. So starchy vegetables are things like potatoes, sweet potato, parsnips, again, not carrots, peas, and corn. So these are all considered carbohydrate. Dairy, like milk and yogurt, but cheese is considered a meat. It's a protein. It's in the protein category because it has more fat. Whereas milk and yogurt are considered a carbohydrate in the dairy world. And processed sugars, obviously, which that's actually a big one if you eat boxed or prepackaged foods or any sort of processed food, because it's going to have processed sugars in it, which we'll go into that a little bit too. It'll be fun. So what's in a name? So as I was talking about earlier, when we're talking about a food label, there's a lot of names that can be sugar, that can be glucose, that can be a carbohydrate. All of these things hone in to carbohydrates. So there's tons of names. Whenever you see any of these names on a label, it's all carbohydrates. So look it over for a quick second, and we're going to play a little game with this in a little bit. Okay, that's all you get. So I guess the question comes in, are they really good for me? The short answer, well, there's two answers. The short answer is yes. And they're good for you because it's energy that you can rely on. As I said before, glucose is the main source of energy for your body. It's the only macronutrient that provides glucose. So the other macronutrients are fat and protein. They don't provide glucose, only carbohydrates. Your brain and your eyes need it the most. So when you're running low on glucose, like say you just don't eat for a while, your brain and your eyes will be the last ones to use the glucose above anything else. Everything else can start using other sources of energy to run, but your brain and your eyes need glucose the most. If you still don't get glucose and you're running really low and your brain and your eyes are the only things using it at that point, there can be psychological impairments, physiological impairments, and there's even been reports of blurriness in the eyes and pain in the eyes from not enough glucose. Your body will store excess glucose in an effort to preserve that store to a limit, and that's what insulin's for. So when you're diabetic and you don't have enough insulin, that's why this is super important, because then your blood sugars go really high, and that's not good, or they go really low, and we just talked about what happens with that. So everyone here is not diabetic. So you have insulin, it collects your glucose, it stores it a little bit, again, to an extent, and then uses it when you go into the non-eating phase of your day, when you're not having the glucose from the food that you've just eaten. Brain, eyes, and muscles, we talked about that. It's rich in vitamins and minerals from A to zinc, better than Centrum. And it's better than Centrum because when you eat natural food as opposed to when you eat a supplement or take a supplement, you have these things called phytonutrients. And they're these weird little things that basically help the nutrients that are in food digest better in your body. They work better in your body understands it, it's organic, it's like putting the right gasoline into your car as opposed to the cheap gasoline into your Ferrari. Well, you all are Ferraris and you don't want just regular unleaded, you want premium. So that's fresh fruits and vegetables versus a supplement. That's the fiber. So here's fiber talk. So there's, as I said, two kinds of fiber, one that keeps things moving and one that kind of hangs around. So whole grains are a good source of kind of the one that pushes things along. And the one that kind of keeps things around and kind of sticks in there, that is really beneficial in reducing your cholesterol because it hangs out in there. It collects bile as it goes through your system, and then your body has to pull cholesterol from your bloodstream to make more bile. So it thusly reduces your cholesterol in your blood. There's also been studies that have shown that that kind of fiber can help absorb carcinogenic cells. It can help reduce cancer risk. The jury's still out on that, but it's interesting that that's a possibility. And they're delicious, right? So we love carbohydrate foods. So why do they seem so bad? So diabetes, as I said before, if you overload on carbohydrates and you eat too much, basically, you're going to weaken your pancreas over a long period of time because your pancreas is working overload to secrete insulin every time you eat a carbohydrate-heavy meal. It's like, okay, insulin, and then it's like, whatever, I'm done. And once it's like, whatever, I'm done, then that's diabetes. So not eating too many carbohydrates in a day is one of the many ways of preventing. This is type 2 diabetes I'm talking about, obviously, the one that you can do one to yourself. So protein. So protein for most people equals lean body mass. Protein is like the good guy in all of this. It has a really good rep. And that's because when you do strength exercising or when you do a lot of physical activity and you tear your muscle fibers, the amino acids that are in protein help kind of rebuild that. And you heal faster, it's good in muscle development, things like that. The downside is you don't get really much energy from that protein, and what energy you do get, your body doesn't want to use. It wants to use glucose. The carbohydrates are there to provide energy so you can do your workout, and the protein there is to help you heal afterwards. So you gotta have both. You can't just do one or the other. Because of this, carbs have a bad rap, because also a lot of intake can equal, as I was talking about earlier, a lot of triglycerides. So if you have a lot of glycerol molecules from glucose, from carbohydrates running through your body, more fats are going to attach to that, and you're going to have more adipose. Now that's also not a good thing. We don't want to have too much adipose. A little bit for insulation is good, but not too much. And also, and also refined foods have a lot of carbohydrates. So think about the middle section of the grocery store. It's boxed rice and boxed pasta and chips and processed foods and soda. It's carbohydrate heaven. That's basically all that's there. Canned vegetables, corn, peas. Okay, so there's maybe canned kale or something. But amongst the whole thing, it's carbohydrate heaven. And that's kind of why carbs have such a bad rep. How much are in food? So this is kind of where we're getting a little more complicated, but I feel like you guys can handle it. So every food group, except for dairy, has about 15 grams per serving. We'll talk about what a serving means later. Dairy has 12 because there's less carbohydrate in lactose than there is the other sugars. So you see grains, starchy vegetables, fruit, sweets. We'll talk about what a sweet is later on too. All 15 grams. Now that's where it's located on the food label, below sodium and above protein. Fiber and sugar is under the carbohydrate category, again, because that's they're part of carbohydrates. It's not really a breakdown, so don't think that you have to add 6 and 11 to get 36. It's just they're categorized under carbohydrates, and that's why they're listed. So let's test your knowledge. So hang out, see if you can find all the sources of carbohydrate in this ingredient statement, and then when you're ready, rate it.
I think I counted 11.
Okay, Emmanuel has it. All right, so what are your 11?
11. So you have the enriched flour, you have the regular flour, you have corn syrup, sugar, corn syrup solids, dextrose, high fructose corn syrup, fructose, cocoa, polydextrose, modified cornstarch, and there's another cornstarch.
So you counted different ones than I did actually, because I didn't count. I didn't count cocoa because cocoa in itself is not necessarily chocolate, right?
Okay.
It's just cocoa.
So that's a cocoa.
But
So
there's 12.
Yeah.
So there's the flour, which is the most obvious one, right? And then there's 11 more. So they're all here. The corn syrup, the sugar, more corn syrup, solids, dextrose, high fructose corn syrup, fructose, glycerin, polydextrose, cornstarch, modified cornstarch, and monoglycerides.
What was that the label for?
A muffin. Just a muffin.
Yeah.
So how much should I eat? So pause for a moment. I'm going to do this little experiment. So I have 2 different containers of water here, and I'm going to dunk a piece of white bread in the water. And this kind of goes back to the fiber thing that we were talking about earlier, as well as why whole grains are better for you, and a piece of whole grain bread. So we're going to let them hang out for a little bit. Let's go back to the bread. So, you know what? Who wants to come up and play with the bread?
I'll play with it.
All right, Colin, come on up. The white bread slice first.
Okay. Oh no, I can't.
So you can't even do it. Now let's do the whole grain bread. Okay, so you can do it. Okay? So the reason for that is that there's fiber. There's nutrients in that bread that's holding it together. Thank you, Colin. I appreciate it. A round of applause for Colin. So basically, that's why whole grain bread is better for you. Because imagine that water being your stomach, right? So that's going to hang out and absorb maybe the carcinogens, but definitely the cholesterol, right? It's going to help move things along and push things out. You don't want things hanging out in there too long. So how much should I eat? So as you can see here, I brought the plate back, and that's important because it's about half of your plate. Look at fruits, the top half, fruits, grains, and dairy, assuming that your vegetables are your non-starchy vegetables. Which makes sense because the Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommends that about half your calories come from carbohydrates. So it makes total sense. It's a little more than half, it can be, but it doesn't make our lives easier. We're just going to say about half. So if you think about a 2,000 calorie diet, which is what is recommended, but that's what everything is based off of the 2,000 calorie diet. So to make our lives easier, we'll just go off of that as well. That's about 1,000 calories in carbs for 2,000. 1,000 calories in carbs. There's 4 calories in 1 gram of carbohydrate. Following so far? Okay. That's 250 grams of carbohydrate from in the 2,000 calorie diet. If there's about 15 grams in a serving, I'm assuming because most of them are 15 grams, we'll let milk slide up 3 grams, not that big of a deal. That's about 17 exchanges. Are you with me? Okay. Anna?
I'm not with you. I'm embarrassed.
No, it's okay. Okay.
What is an exchange?
Okay, so we're gonna get into that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
good
that's
question.
what was confusing me.
Okay.
Okay.
So an exchange is a 15-gram serving.
Okay.
A 15-gram serving are these things: a quarter of a bagel, a slice of bread, a tortilla, a cup of milk, 6 ounces of yogurt. So the different colors are the different food groups. So the light purple are the grains. The orange is the fruits. The pinkish salmon color is the starchy veg. The blue is dairy, and the white is the sweets. So soda, candy bars, Hershey Kisses, honey, that's all your sweets. So I've given you a handout of all of the exchanges. So you have the exchanges. So if you think now, okay, that helps for now. But when you're out in the real world, you're like, what does this even mean? So if you look at your plate and you say you're out dining,
Can you get a handout?
I'll give it to you, and you're out eating. About your fist is about a cup. A cup for you, because if you're a little person, you have a little fist. That's a cup for you. If you're a big person, you have a big fist. That's a cup for you, and that makes sense, right? Because you gotta feed what's there. A slightly open palm, a cupped palm, just to fill that little inside. That's about half of a cup. Okay, that makes sense, right? And then your thumb is about a table. Question time. So now we're going to go back to the beginning, and we're going to see if we can answer these questions. Now I have prizes for those who answer the questions. You can select whichever one you want out of the little situation we have going on here. So what is a carb?
Sugar and energy.
Okay, great. What do you want?
An apple.
You got it.
Not a can of
Bonus
beans.
question. How many grams of carbohydrate are in a serving of apple?
Is that open to anyone or her?
Her.
Is that, oh, bonus.
So it's a fruit. How many grams are in a serving of fruit?
How many grams? 15.
Nice job.
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Okay. Name 2 reasons why carbs are important for everyday life.
Bowel move.
Anna.
Oh, sorry. I just screwed up.
I believe move things along is the phrase we're using, and absorb bad things too.
Great. Awesome. And there's a lot of other reasons too, right? So there's energy. There's nutrients. There's your basic metabolic processes. All those things. What do you want?
Have a smart food.
Yes, and then the white cheddar, which are delicious. Name the food groups where carbohydrates exist. Pete.
Grains and fruits.
Excellent. What would you like?
You know I want those black.
I know you do. I know you do. All right, the next one's from Colin. He's raising him twice. I totally listened.
Yeah,
both
it's
times.
a desperate attempt.
Where are carbohydrates on a food label?
Between sodium and protein.
Good. Bonus question. What 2 things are underneath carbohydrates that are not
Fiber
necessarily...
and sugar.
Excellent.
Yes.
Now what do you want?
The apple.
Okay, so what is a carbohydrate exchange? Colin again.
It's 1 unit of 15 grams of carbs.
Excellent. What are some examples of that?
What are some examples?
Yeah, give me 2.
Of the apple that I'm holding in my hand.
Great.
And what we just said that so like most of that bag of Smart Food is an exchange
Right. Great. 1 slice of bread.
or 1 slice of.
I like that one. That one's easy. We can make a sandwich. So I have 3 things left, and the next question is 3 things. So someone name 1 food that contains 15 grams of carbohydrate per serving. Now you named 2 just now, but there's tons more, right? There's a lot of ones that contain 15 grams. So there's a lot of exchanges out there. So who wants to go first? Larissa.
A pancake.
Great. What do you want?
Can I get the Chobani, please?
Yes. Pete.
Good. Oh!
That's what I could've been
Tablespoon of honey.
Great. What do you want?
Smart food thing. Dinner, right?
Wait, 1 more.
A cup of milk.
Great. Good job. You get okay. Any more questions?
Oh no, that's good.
Pete.
Carbohydrates are so necessary for life. What makes something like the Atkins diet viable?
Well, it's not. Dr. Atkins died of a heart attack.
I know, wasn't that funny?
So
What people do survive on it for.
So the whole idea of
Um,
so the whole idea of the Atkins diet is that you have to eat carbohydrate in your life. You can't just eat meat and da. You're allowed a certain amount a day. So that's where you sustain yourself. And the energy that comes from protein is called ketones. I don't want to get too much into that, but there's energy that comes from protein that's broken down. Your body doesn't want to use that, but everything that's not your brain and your eyes will use ketones to get along. Like your red blood cells, your muscles, your extraneous tissues, your organs. They can all live off ketones, they just don't want to. Anna.
What are some are there any products that like are labeled that people tend to think of as healthy carbs but you should avoid?
Breakfast cereals are a great example of this because they'll often advertise made with whole grains.
Mhm.
I'm like Lucky Charms. And you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And they're considering, because those cereals are made from either corn or wheat, that's their whole grain. Corn is their whole grain. And obviously that's a stretched out version of the truth. So it's not a whole grain. They might even incorporate, in your brochure that I gave you, we talk about the bran, endosperm, and the germ. So they might incorporate the two other components into that and process it through and still call it a whole grain, but it's still processed. So it's kind of like giving you what you need, but not really. So breakfast cereal is a big one. Things like whole wheat, like we said earlier, whole wheat is just like brown flour. Not like, it might have some texture to it, but really like this, you can see there's some nuttiness there. There's some business going on in that bread, and that's what whole grain bread is like. When you buy whole wheat bread, doesn't it almost look like white bread, just brown? You don't see anything. You don't see any business going on in the bread. And so, yeah, go ahead. And so that's a visual way to know. Multigrain is a tricky way, that's in brochure too, of saying, oh, this is healthier for you. But really it's just like, it's like a cheap way of making whole grain. So like adding pieces of grain into a non-bleached version of white bread.
Oh.
It's silly, but it's cheaper for them to do it, and they can call it multigrain, and then you buy it for the same price as you buy whole grain bread, and then they're getting money. Anybody else? Thank you guys for coming. These are my references from that line to. I really appreciate it.